So welcome, everyone. We're thrilled and honored to have you here this evening for another program. Floridians for Democracy, if you haven't noticed, made a very conscious decision early part of this year. After the last November's election, it took many of us some time to pick ourselves up off the ground and realize that we couldn't give up. In fact, we had to work harder. And one of the conscious decisions that we made was that we needed to reach across the aisle, both on the liberal side and the conservative side and those in between, and try to build a larger constituency, both of education and awareness, but also on action and advocacy. And in doing so, we've met some wonderful people along that journey. 2 programs ago, many of you got an opportunity to meet Bob Levy, who will be introduced in just a few moments, who did our program about can the U.S. Supreme Court save democracy? And we're still waiting for that one, but we can always be hopeful that some pieces will be positive. And we had an opportunity to meet our other keynote tonight, Jay Lapeyre. So with that, let me tell you what we'll be doing. We will go through the program. You'll be facilitated by our moderator, Bill Petrarca, that many of you have already met. Bill's one of our co-founders. He also, a few months ago, founded a rapidly growing organization called Compassionate Fort Myers. There are a number of compassionate organizations in Florida and around the country. And it very much ties nicely into tonight's program, which is why we asked Bill if he would serve as the moderator. Because that's really what this program is about, is how to bring people together across religious lines and political lines to make a difference in the culture and the understanding that compromise is not a dirty word, collaboration is not a dirty word, communication is not a dirty word. We must build better collaboration, communication, trust, etc. So with that, thank you so much for each of you for signing in. And we are ready to go. With that, I'll introduce Bill Petrarca.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. We have 2 wonderful gentlemen with us tonight. One of the benefits of preparing these sessions is getting to meet the speakers. And these are 2 excellent people. And I'm proud to introduce Jay Lapeyre and Bob Levy. And in the material that was sent out earlier, you did get a full description of their background, but I just wanted to highlight just a couple items. For Jay, he is the chair of the Cato Institute and the Atlantis Society board, both those boards in Washington, D.C., and he is past board chair of Tulane University. And Bob Levy is the chairman emeritus at the Cato Institute. Bob entered George Mason Law School and graduated at the age of 54, at the young age of 54, as class valedictorian. So he is somebody to respect. He was also co-counsel in the groundbreaking Supreme Court gun case, District of Columbia versus Heller. So welcome both of you. Today we'll be discussing the timely and thought-provoking initiative connected to America's upcoming 250th anniversary. The Free Society Coalition, which you'll hear about tonight, has developed something they call the Happy Birthday Freedom brochure, Happy Birthday Freedom brochure. And it's a resource designed to spark reflection and dialogue and debate around some of the founding principles of the Declaration of Independence. So firstly, tonight, Jay will share how this initiative by the Free Society Coalition highlights how these principles united the founders across religious and political divides, and how a modern understanding of these ideas can offer a framework for civil discourse and shared values. So we'll explore how this brochure, you're going to find out more about this brochure that's a part of this initiative, how it can be used by educators, organizations, and yourself for meaningful conversations, programming, and collaboration. In the second part of our session today, Bob will guide us through a related exploration on the philosophy and the ethical connections between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So I hope you're as excited as I am in hearing about how our founding documents came to be. So Jay and Bob, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Let's dive into the story behind the Free Society Coalition project and explore how people can get involved. So Jay, I want to start with you. Tell us about the Free Society Coalition and how it came to be and what it stands for.
Well, it's interesting because the basic roots were from a dispute inside of what I'll call the liberty movement. Different points of view on libertine, anarchism, religion, atheism, with the primary focus on religion and atheism being what we brought a small group of us brought a few dozen scholars together in Philadelphia to say we spend a lot of time focused on what divides us. Is there a way for us to rethink what are the shared values that unite us? And if we can develop those, would that give us an opportunity to promote those values to reach new audiences in a way that would not be possible or practical otherwise? And we ran probably a full day of exercises and work tied to that, and ultimately concluded, which I expected, which is that the other side is dead wrong. I'm right, and I haven't changed a single view of mine, which none of us intended would happen, nor did we expect it. But we also said, but would we agree that the other guy, gal, is very thoughtful, serious, and every bit as committed to the principles that we framed in this document and developed, which we'll call a modern interpretation or modern of the Declaration of the values reflected in the Declaration. And 100% of the people said yes. I respect the people I've been working with, and that gave us what I'll call the idea of, well, there's an MO here. How can we use this as a tool to broaden outreach and go far beyond where we were? And then that moved us to the next stage. So that was the genesis of it.
So how does...
I'm sorry, one more point. So what the essentials we tended to agree on were what we framed which is that freedom is essential to human flourishing and can't be sustained without an ethical base. And we said, and that moral argument, the ethical argument, is foundational to a tool that we have to deal with the nihilism and the authoritarianism on the right and the left. So those were sort of outcomes, but they were tied to the foundational idea of freedom and liberty, individual choice, and then responsibility for the foreseeable consequences of choices. So these were the uniting themes that brought us together.
That's interesting. There's been several groups that have brought forth efforts to bridge the partisan divide that we experience. And how does this effort differ from the ones that are out there?
Well, I think a lot of people are focused on changing other people's minds. This effort is focused on values that are upstream from politics. So tonight is a little unique for us. If Bob's unique status as constitutional scholar and a person who's also intimately engaged in the work we're doing at the Free Society Coalition, he has the ability to bridge both. But normally we would simply be trying to focus on the ethics and not a link to the Constitution or to political issues, which I know is a little different than the Floridians, which is a little bit of why I'm really hopeful that we'll learn a good bit from the audience about their thoughts on this effort. So, the idea is to focus on ethics and stay upstream from politics, and to engage people with very little background in thinking about three things. One, what did the founders mean with this language, this very explicit language? And once I understand that, you sort of go with, well, and now I have a shot of nothing can be loved or hated unless it's first understood. So now I can try to understand that. Then I can move into the next stage of saying, what do I think of it myself? What are my independent views? And then the final is that we did, the Free Society Coalition developed the Philadelphia Declaration, which was one example of what a group who brought a group of scholars together and put together a document. And you can look at that and say, this part I disagree with, this part I agree with, whatever. But the point is, engage your brain independently. Do not outsource your mind to your emotions. Don't outsource it to your tribe. And first understand before you reach a judgment. And then from that, then work hard to see what unites us in the pursuit of truth.
So it's interesting that you're bringing this out around the 250th anniversary of the founding principles. Can you talk more about the timing?
Yeah, well, that was it became fairly clear early that the 250th there was going to be a huge interest in promoting celebrations for the 250th, and what is different about ours is many of the celebrations go into the history, or they go into celebrating abstractions that really aren't clearly defined, American values or something of that nature. And we wanted to really focus on the Declaration itself, keep it separate from the Constitution, because the Constitution is a lot more complex, and allow people to look at the ethical values that are common to all people. And we've seen that billions of people globally respond to the Declaration and the language of the Declaration because it speaks to human values. So that was the timing, is to say, how do we leverage that? Because we don't want to let this 250th, the semi-quincentennial, the idea that calling it a semi-quincentennial also frames that what's going to guide us for the next 250, and that's going to be an important part of. And we're not going to get there with the partisan arms race that we're in today, that alienates and is so divisive with people. So.
Well, I know we're going to get into the brochure itself in a couple minutes, but what are your goals for this brochure and the initiative, the broader initiative?
So I think the broader initiative started with a more limited effort to unite the Liberty group in a common message that would appeal more broadly. I think this is much more about let's engage people in civil discourse, open inquiry, pursuit of truth, your independent judgment, but do it using the experience of the founders. They had very, very strong differences of opinion on lots of subjects, but they were able to identify and discern the human values that were upstream from politics, at least, and talk about, as imperfect as it was, the first political statement that recognized the dignity and rights of individuals, and make that statement. And can that be part of what informs how we think and what can help unite us? Because it united them. Is there a way for us to leverage on that as we go forward?
Well, I know the brochure is meant to be a conversational tool. Right. Have you had any examples in how the brochure has encouraged the focus on ethical questions?
I think the best way to do it is just to get into the brochure. So if you can pull up even the first page, and then I'll walk us through.
Hold on just a second. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah, go to the second page, sorry. And we'll have this deck in the
Oops, I'm sorry.
I think.
Yeah, we'll have
There
this
you go.
in follow up for everybody after the meeting and the next day.
Now, is this the page you want?
Next page, sorry.
There you go. Okay.
So if you go to the third paragraph and you say, think of the pamphlet now you're reading as an intellectual stimulant. It inspires you to think hard about the ideas that gave birth to the nation, making them more relevant and exciting than ever. So this is intended to be a fun journey. Maybe not what we're used to with politics. So that's a part of staying away from that. And then if you go to the next, let's see, the third, stay on that page. I'm sorry. Go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just want to stay on the previous page?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And you can see that the second to last paragraph, it's a thought starter and a platform for you to begin an exciting intellectual journey of discovery. That's the idea. This is unbelievably fantastic achievement in human history, and to not appreciate it in its context, for all the imperfections, is really a sad loss, and that's the idea to start with. Then go to the next page. I'll try to speed up a little bit here. So here we isolate what we'll call the eternal truths. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That if those of us, and I'm sure it's almost everyone in the audience that has experience with how the United States and what we're perceived globally, I can tell you in our business globally, that's what resonates. That's what captures it. We hold these truths to be self-evident: equal rights, equal right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So then go to the next page. Yeah, and this is where I think it gets to be a lot of fun. So if you look at these questions, the first is, and this is the why does this engage? Why will this serve the purpose of independent thinking? Which I think may have been part of the question, Bill, that you framed. Was whenever you deal in a Socratic process, you have to put your mind to work. And that's what this is about. And then if you go to the middle of the paragraph where it says, this declaration was the first in human history to establish a government with the moral premise of respect for the dignity and rights of individuals as individuals and not groups. I think that is a remarkable and profound advance. Then the idea of the process I mentioned before. First, let's understand what the founders' claims were, and let's dig into those and start to and then we can reach our own thoughts. But you go to that first question, and each of these is broken down. The paragraph I read before: we hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, that means there is a truth. Well, how do you know it? What is self-evident? How do you know that? Then all men are created equal. What do we mean by equal? In what respect? Is this an aspirational claim, or is it a claim of fact? And if it's a claim of fact, to exactly what? Endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Where do rights come from? These are fantastic questions. My grandkids are over, and I was going to test this out and see if my 3-year-old could engage with them, but I'm a little reluctant to do that. But I do think the idea is that starting certainly by high school, And most of us, Neil, we know that kids have very strong views about who should make the important decisions in their lives. Just when you want them to do something that they don't want to do. So the next is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why liberty? Why the pursuit of happiness? Why not happiness? Why not the greatest good for the greatest number, whatever? And then to secure rights. What's the purpose of government is to secure rights and not grant them. That's very different. And then deriving just power. So you can see the kinds of questions and the way it's framed. It's designed to force the mind to engage with this content in a deep way. And then you can move into what do you believe in that next section. And then finally move into the Philadelphia Declaration as one example that you may not agree with to start to frame what is your judgment. It's my life, my liberty, my happiness, and my thoughts about all of these things and who should make the important decisions in my life. So that's the broadest, and we really are hopeful that this can get some traction as an educational tool on the front end of any serious discussion of the Declaration.
You want me to stop sharing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're fine. Yep.
Good. So I presume you'll get some challenges. Are you anticipating challenges in this initiative?
Yeah, I'm hopeful, and I'm looking. Actually, I'm eager to get audience response and thoughts on this, because I think there are lots of reasons why something that came from the liberty side. Now, we are trying to dramatically expand the diversity and the engagement in the process, and we have a number of people who I think are eager to join our effort, but we haven't updated all of that yet. So we get that one.
Do you have any thoughts about how to engage the younger generation in this process?
I think that it's designed. This is designed as a tool. The goal here is to be a tool for education, so that if someone is looking for material that any age of educator can engage with, any class level, that's having a conversation that's other than fireworks and rah-rah. I think the idea here is to engage people in these discussions, and then also if people are having events celebrating and educating on the Declaration, that this can be a tool. So the idea is to leverage organizations and leverage educators. The Sphere program at Cato, FEE, lots of liberty groups, but I think it's much broader, and we're trying to reach to colleges. The Jack Miller Center has a summit on civic education, and that's part of what we'll be using this as a time to educate and spread the word and get engagement. So it's really a network. We're not a nonprofit trying to raise money. We're just trying to provide a tool that people find useful in promoting an aligned purpose that their organizations have with our mission.
And so, just one last point before we go into Bob's discussion. So you see this as a viable tool for bridging the hyperpartisan political and religious divides that we have in our country.
Yes, I think that if you go through those discussions, they're challenging you to think not about what your tribe may view it, and it's upstream from all of those differences. It's really just about your view of those issues. The same, put yourself in the shoes of the founders, modernize your interpretation of what freedom means and what a human being is, and then see what you think.
Good. Okay, so let's go to Bob and talk about the relationship between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And Jay, you're welcome to chime in as you like as we get going.
I'll correct Bob when I see him just stepping out of line.
Bob, what foundational political question do you believe the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution sought to answer at that time, and how was the answer shaped?
Well, first, let me say thanks to you, Bill, and also to Jim and to Floridians for Democracy. It's a pleasure to participate in the discussion this evening. So my comments on these key questions are only going to scratch the surface. The realistic goal this evening isn't to offer definitive answers to these questions, but to encourage more extensive study and dialogue. So with that qualification, here's what I consider to be the foundational political question. What is the proper relationship between individuals and their government? The Declaration framed a two-part answer to that. First, government may not intrude on our unalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And second, government may exercise only the powers to which we, the people, have consented. 13 years after that declaration was signed, the Constitution was ratified. And like the Declaration, it can be viewed through both a powers of government prism and a rights of individuals prism. The framers viewed the powers of government narrowly and the rights of individuals broadly. And in most respects, personal choice would be paramount, not coerced behavior. Of course, choice has to be exercised within a system that's based on the rule of law. And that phrase, the rule of law, encompasses, I think, a number of critical ingredients, the most important of which are clarity in the law, stability, transparency, equality of application, due process, checks and balances against abuse, and the protection of fundamental rights. So those are the principles that I believe to be incorporated in both the Declaration and the Constitution.
So the Declaration speaks of rights endowed by our Creator. Can the reference to a Creator be reconciled with the Constitution's separation of church and state that's grounded in the First Amendment?
So I don't believe there is a religious conflict between the two documents. The author of the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson, and several of the other framers were deists, meaning that they believed in God as creator, but they did not impose on others a belief that God controls the ongoing operations of government. In fact, the Declaration itself speaks of both, and I'm quoting here, the laws of nature and of nature's God. So for constitutional purposes, our rights are not limited to those that derive from natural or supernatural origins, but the Declaration and the Constitution both explicitly provide that our rights do not come from the king. Individuals have rights independent of government. So put differently, the Constitution maps the relationship between Americans and their government. It does not mandate the relationship between Americans and their God. That's up to each of us individually. In a nutshell, we start with rights. Then we secure those rights by delegating limited and enumerated powers to a government that's bound by a written constitution. And that constitution expressly protects religious and other liberties. Plainly, the Constitution does not insulate our lives from religion, but it does insulate our government from religion.
Wow, I have to think about that, Bob. That's excellent. So tell us about the linkage between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. As you mentioned, they were separated by several years.
Well, first the Declaration, the cardinal truths set out by Jefferson that you heard from Jay are that all men are created equal with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So no one was supposed to have rights superior to anyone else's. Now we recognize, of course, that the atrocity of slavery was a conspicuous departure from that ideal. It took a civil war to remedy that odious exception. Jefferson then continued to secure these rights. And notice, as Jay pointed out, he didn't say grant, he said secure. So we already had the rights. The Constitution highlights that same theme when it refers in the Ninth Amendment to rights retained by the people. Naturally, we can't retain what we didn't already possess. And Jefferson next tells us that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So we were born with rights. We didn't get them from government. Indeed, whatever powers government possessed came from us, from the consent of the governed. Our rights to life, liberty, and to pursue happiness requires only that we respect the equal rights of others. When it came time to draft the new Constitution, the founders' task was to devise a government strong enough to secure our rights against both domestic and foreign oppression, but not so strong as to be oppressive in and of itself. And to achieve that, the Constitution granted to government certain powers, and then it checked and balanced those powers to prevent abuse. The rights were guaranteed. The powers were limited.
Well, I wish you were the advisor to our current president. So there's like a ethical framework that's developed here between the Declaration and the Constitution. How do you see that relationship between the political philosophy and then the ethics?
Well, first, let me suggest a couple of definitions. Political philosophy deals with the relationship between individuals and their government. And clearly, that's the focus of both the Declaration and the Constitution. Ethics, by contrast, deals with values and virtues. So values are the things we strive to gain and to keep, and virtues are the means by which we seek those values. Now, obviously, ethics and politics are very much interrelated. Our political heritage is built on a system of ethical values, most particularly in the case of the United States, the values of liberty and justice. But for the most part, Americans treat our choice of virtues, that is conduct, good and bad, right and wrong, those are private matters, limited, of course, by legal codes if and when our choices deprive other people of their rights. So the key point is this: our founding documents are not codes of behavior that individual citizens have to obey. The dual purpose of both the Declaration and the Constitution is to limit the power of government and secure individual liberty. It's not the people or the citizens who are required to obey those documents. It's the government. And we need only to look at the daily headlines to appreciate the gravity of that concept.
Wow, that's a really great delineation there, Bob. Thank you for that. So the Declaration is kind of a manifesto that was created for individual liberty. And then the framers didn't craft the Bill of Rights until 2 years after the Constitution was ratified. So why wasn't the Bill of Rights included in the original Constitution?
The founders added a Bill of Rights as an extra precaution, even though James Madison, among others, initially thought that it was unnecessary. First, he argued that some rights, like life, liberty, and property, were part of our natural rights and our common law heritage. They were rights that we possessed before the Constitution was written, and we never relinquished those rights. Second, he argued other rights, like free exercise of religion, for example, that they didn't have to be guaranteed because the Constitution enumerated the government's powers, and the federal government had no enumerated power to control religious exercise. And if there were no government power to restrict religion, then it wouldn't be necessary to have a right that protected against such restriction. And Madison was also concerned that the listing in the Constitution of certain rights might be misinterpreted to mean that we didn't have any rights that weren't listed. And since it wouldn't be possible to list each and every right, the founders added the Ninth Amendment. It says that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And those unenumerated rights, like the right to travel, just to cite one example, they are protected, even if they're not expressly listed in the Bill of Rights.
So the framers obviously were pretty smart in crafting a way to amend the Constitution. Yet, after 250 years, we only have 27 amendments, 10 of which were the Bill of Rights. So why do you think there are so few amendments over the years?
Well, I think there are three key reasons why only 17 amendments in 234 years. Two of the reasons are pretty good and one not so good. The first good reason is that both the Declaration and the Constitution are incredibly well-crafted documents written by brilliant legal minds, and their vision of liberty is every bit as relevant today as it was in the late 1700s. The second good reason is that the constitutional amendment process is pretty difficult. Essentially, two-thirds of both the House and the Senate proposed amendments. They have to be ratified by three-fourths of the states. Not surprisingly, that hasn't happened very often, and as a result, we've had a stable constitutional framework. I think the not-so-good reason for so few amendments is that the Supreme Court has sometimes accomplished through the back door what the Congress and the states couldn't accomplish through the amendment process. Regrettably, the court seems on occasion to have rewritten the Constitution by expanding government powers and failing to secure individual liberties. And that, of course, is a lengthy topic for another day.
So you've spoken a little bit about limiting governmental powers along with the expanse of individual rights. And so how do these two features interact? It seem to be conflicting with each other.
So I think the structure of our federal system is best captured by the final two provisions in the Bill of Rights, Ninth and 10th Amendments, but both of which were designed to implement the principles initially set out in the Declaration. So the 10th Amendment tells us that the national government can exercise only limited and enumerated powers, obviously not including the, quoting from the Declaration, the long train of abuses and usurpations that are listed in the Declaration. The Ninth Amendment addresses rights and not powers. And specifically, as I noted before, the Ninth Amendment provides that the identification of certain rights in the Constitution wasn't meant to exclude other rights that are not specifically identified, including, first and foremost, our unalienable right to pursue happiness. So note that the presumptions underlying those two amendments, the Ninth and 10th, they're exactly opposite. And I think if you understand that, then you understand the fabric of our founding documents. The 10th Amendment says if the power isn't there, the federal government doesn't have it. The Ninth Amendment is just the reverse. Merely because the right isn't there, that doesn't mean we don't have it. We have a broad range of rights that we possessed pre-government and pre-Constitution.
And yet, as you mentioned, the Declaration of Independence refers to unalienable rights, and yet the Constitution even goes further with the Rights Declaration. Can you explain how those two work together, what the framework is for that?
Yeah, it's true that the Declaration names only a few of these unalienable rights, but it's also true that the Constitution specifically identifies a lot of other rights. Most of them are in the Bill of Rights. Remember, however, that the Declaration also contains a full 27 paragraphs representing a history of repeated injuries by the king. So those injuries are the basis for many of the rights that are secured by the Constitution. For example, the Declaration refers to the right of representation, the administration of justice, the quartering of troops, trial by jury, each of which was later codified as a right guaranteed by the Constitution. So, in other words, the two documents are directly linked, even though they served different purposes. The rights identified in the Declaration were those that the Crown had violated, listed to prove that the colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. Once that independence had been assured, the Constitution was then crafted as the architecture for governing the new nation. The rights identified in the Constitution are not only the rights that the king had usurped, but all other rights essential to the preservation of liberty, including those that are not expressly enumerated, but nonetheless encompassed within the Ninth Amendment.
Wow, that's amazing. So let me just change the question a little bit different here. Some say that America has lost its moral compass. If that's true, can the problem be traced in part to the framers' conception of governance?
Well, from its founding, America was an imperfect nation, slavery being the most obvious imperfection. So we've made enormous progress, despite, I think it's fair to say, there is some residual discrimination. Today, however, our critics point to other problems, additional problems, especially what they perceive of as moral decay. And as a result, we have both right-wing and left-wing zealots who want to enlist the coercive power of government to compel moral behavior. But unless an individual is acting in a manner that visits harm on innocent bystanders, coerced codes of behavior, they can themselves be counterproductive and even immoral. So, as I stated last month in our September Zoom program, it's a short step down a slippery slope from government restrictions on non-injurious conduct to government restrictions on what I can read, with whom I can associate, what foods I can eat, what clothes I can wear, with whom I can be intimate, and what I can say and write, and even what religion I can and cannot follow. Private lifestyle choices are the essence of individual liberty, and the freedom to choose is antithetical to a government-enforced code of personal behavior. So the principle, I think, is straightforward. We should be free to live our lives as we choose, as long as we don't interfere with other people who want to do the same. And that principle leads me to one further, I think, interesting observation that involves what's called the Madisonian dilemma. Pitting majority rule, which we have in this country for the most part, against individual rights. In his book, The Tempting of America, the late Judge Robert Bork wrote, "In wide areas of life, majorities are entitled to rule simply because they are majorities. There are, nonetheless," Judge Bork went on to say, "some things majorities must not do to minorities, some areas of life in which the individual must be free of majority rule." Judge Bork was clearly onto something, but I think he blurred James Madison's vision. The founders instituted a plan of governments whereby in wide areas individuals rule, not because they're part of a majority, but because they're born free. And by contrast, majorities do rule, but in just a few areas, and not because they're inherently entitled to rule, but because they're authorized to do so by our Constitution.
Bob, I got a question from the audience after you talked about the Ninth and 10th Amendment. And the question is, so if we really, and Jay, feel free to chime in on this. So if we really had lived by the Ninth and 10th Amendments, maybe there would not have been a civil war, nor would there have been slavery. Any thoughts on that?
I agree that, as I said, the Constitution and the nation itself was imperfect, and slavery was the obvious imperfection, and it did take a civil war. And even now, we are still trying to remedy some of the residual discrimination that still exists today. Nonetheless, perfection is not the goal. The goal is the best you can be. And we have, I think, moved in that direction, and we continue to move in that direction. So while the nation was born on a premise that manifested equality, and while the nation didn't initially live up to that premise, we are struggling mightily to move in the right direction. And I would argue that we are, in major part, succeeding in that effort.
Bob, just to add, while that's the most egregious example, it was also, as with so many other issues, the dominant standard accepted everywhere in the world. And the revolutionary idea was the individual and the moral rights of individuals. That was what was unique, not the slavery. The slavery was common, and as was everything from gay rights to women's rights to all the rest of the less onerous or egregious, but still personally horrific experiences that people have had throughout history.
So one last question when we go, so we can go into a closing and then a Q&A from the audience. So this seems to bring up a conflict between individualism and the need for cooperation to advance the common good. How do you see that being reconciled, those two pressures?
So the framers, they understood the need for cooperation because individuals can never be completely self-sufficient. And that's why we have rules to make peaceful collaboration and trading possible. Government is charged legitimately and constitutionally with enforcing those rules. The risk, however, is that too many rules will produce barriers to interaction and a system of special favors for the people who are politically connected. Individualism, by contrast, promotes the common good spontaneously, as long as there's no commanding power that interferes with freely chosen actions, unless, of course, those actions violate the rights of others. And the empirical evidence is compelling. More wealth, including a greater abundance for the poor, is a byproduct of individual liberty, and less wealth arises out of dictatorships on both the right and the left. Now, I think it's certainly obvious that individualism is not flawless, but neither are the alternatives. The relevant standard against which to compare our current system is not some utopian world in which justice is ubiquitous and all the inequities have been systemically purged. Instead, we have to look at the current framework versus one in which autocrats exercise power. Maybe some problems would be solved, but other problems would certainly multiply, including, for example, disincentives to create, favors to special interests, reduced economic growth, government-conferred monopolies, restricted consumer choices, overlapping laws, confusing laws, abuses of public power, excessive resources devoted to politicking and to lobbying. Now, to be sure, individualism can be messy and unpredictable, but it's the only arrangement consistent with liberty, which to me is the highest of all values.
Yeah, in the Philadelphia Declaration, which was the part of the brochure that we did not get to, we explicitly address the question that we are individuals and defined by our unique character, and we should have the agency, that is the right for us to choose. We should be the actors, the people who act on that, and we should be the beneficiaries or the people responsible for those. But we also then address that we're social beings, and that fundamentally the issue is the more you can enable individual choice for people to develop win-win, beneficial, mutually rewarding relationships, the more you develop character and the more you benefit society. And over time, those things grow. We're not suggesting that this is a sudden flick of the switch. It's definitely a part of a long-term cultural game.
So I want to give each of you a chance to kind of close your thoughts and give us a call to action, and then we'll open it up for questions. I do have a couple questions that I've gotten from the chat area, so I'll ask those later. But Jay, I'll start with you. How can individuals and organizations engage with the Free Society Coalition project and help amplify what, the Happy Birthday Freedom Initiative? Yeah,
I think first, if you read the brochure yourself and then develop your independent thoughts about it, and if you have the thoughts that you'd like to share with us, please do that. Then share that with others. Sign up to get information and to share updates, and just promote it with all of the different organizations that you're connected with as something that they should consider as a front-end standalone module with whatever other work that they do. We do have an intro page that we can send that teaches you as an educator or someone how to introduce the brochure. But just walk through the process. That's the idea. So those would be the things to do. And then also invite speakers. If you have your organization and it's large enough, we're happy to send brochures and have speakers engage remotely or in person if we can cover the cost. So if the organization will cover the cost.
And many of these resources are available on your website?
Correct.
Good. So I would encourage people to go to that. The freesocietycoalition.org. Correct.
freesocietycoalition.org, and you'll also see a link to the brochure that's in the here with the materials, as well as on that link.
And so, Bob, I would ask you a similar question. What actions would you recommend for those who want to promote the ideas we've discussed tonight?
Well, I think individuals can make their voices heard. For starters, whenever an opportunity arises, discuss these important questions and shared values with family and friends and business contacts. And I think become active in public policy organizations. The obvious processes of sending letters to the editor, write to your political representatives, participate in meetings and rallies and protests. Needless to say, vote, and perhaps even become a candidate. Lots of people express concern that they don't individually have political impact. Well, one answer to that concern is to pool resources. There are lots of organizations across the ideological spectrum that analyze key issues. They publish magazine and newspaper articles on these issues. They appear on radio and TV, testify before Congress and state legislatures, engage in public interest litigation before the courts. They file friend of the court briefs in a lot of major cases, and they lobby federal and state legislatures and even the executive officials. So most of those organizations are funded by tax-deductible contributions. And whatever your political persuasion, they provide a means to leverage your influence and a pathway to protect and secure freedom and democracy.
So this question, I think, may be toward Jay, but Bobby may want to chime in on it as well. So in your outreach to organizations or groups, have you had any discussions with retired military veteran organizations?
I have not. It's possible that some others have, but it'd be great if you have thoughts, or you connect us and connect someone to me, and we can definitely enable a follow-up. So that'd be great.
And as you strive to outreach to across the political aisle, have you had any outreach to the MAGA leaders and the Christian nationalists?
We have I think they have, in many cases, first, I'm not sure about the MAGA leaders. I'm not sure that would be an audience that would go easily. But politics is kind of the death of truth on all sides. And I think that the entire process here is to pursue truth. So it's one where I think we're going to get lip service, but we're not going to get genuine engagement. Most people want to use the 250th in the political sphere for a partisan purpose, as opposed to. So I'm not saying that isn't worth doing, but I think we have to build a movement that's really a little bit on the outside of politics.
I might add that the very purpose of the Free Society Coalition is to encourage cooperation and compromise. And in order to do that, of course, you have to relate to people and groups who are inclined in that direction. And I believe it's fair to say that extremes on both sides of the political aisle are less inclined toward compromise and cooperation. So both the far right and the far left, they would not be, I think, primary audiences for this kind of process. But there are a heck of a lot of people in the middle. So the far left and the far right comprise of a small percentage of our population. The vast majority of people are inclined, and they're searching for means by which they can cooperate, and that's what I think the Free Society Coalition will provide.
Yeah, I think just to add, I think many people today understand what they think they hate. They unite around and they get psychic value from hating another side. And some may find neither and may hate both sides. But the idea here is to figure out what we're for and to think through in an independent, open-minded way, and to share ideas and to really struggle with solutions as opposed to just engaging in, take down the other guy. If you watch a political campaign, rarely will it be something that's positive. It's almost overwhelmingly about fear of the other side and what they're going to do. And we want to get past all that and unite.
And you're suggesting that the question structure that you're proposing is a way to
exactly
navigate around the fear issue.
Yeah. And you engage your brain. You have to think about the substantive issues. They're not directly political. And you then think, what do I think? Is it my life? Do I want to make the decisions? Who should make them? What do these things mean? So I think that's all part of an individual process. Each mind has to go through this journey on their own, or they abdicate it to their emotions or to their tribe or to something else. And we're saying that it's your life. Don't do that. Do not abdicate it. Think for yourself.
And this is, I think, a question that I think brings out the potential conflict between individualism and the common good. So currently, Florida governmental leaders are advocating the elimination of vaccine mandates as a freedom to choose issue. Well, vaccines for polio, chickenpox, whooping cough, and more have saved millions of lives and protected millions of individuals. 50 years ago, there were scourges these were scourges on our society. So this, quote, freedom could return these devastating communicable diseases. So which freedom should win out here, or how do we resolve these kinds of issues?
Well, let me weigh in on that, and Jay can add what he likes. I want to address, since it's my area, the legal framework for that kind of resolution. And the Supreme Court has dealt with this. There were two cases, recent cases, Biden versus Missouri, and that was a win for the administration. It was an opinion by, oddly enough, the three liberals plus Roberts plus Kavanaugh. And the court held that the Department of Health and Human Services could require health care workers at facilities that participate in the Medicare and Medicaid programs to be fully vaccinated against COVID, unless they qualified for some kind of medical or religious exemption. So the reasoning there was that the core function of Health and Human Services is to protect the health and safety of Medicare and Medicaid patients. Now, that I certainly agree with. The court reached a different result, however, when Congress was not footing the bill. In National Federation of Independent Businesses versus the Department of Labor, the 6 conservatives on the court held that OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, could not order all private sector companies with more than, I think it was 99 employees, to vaccinate everybody. The unsigned opinion in that case was that OSHA's role, now mind you, we're talking about a government agency, is to safeguard against hazards created by the workplace, not to shield employees from a global public health catastrophe. That's up to state governments and Congress, not up to the executive branch. And this is an issue we're dealing with every single day of the last few weeks, the extent to which the executive branch is exercising power that was not delegated to it. So the most committed textualists on the court, Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, they cited the court's recently adopted doctrine called the Major Questions Doctrine, which says if you want to delegate power to the executive branch, the power to mandate vaccines in the private sector, quite different than the agencies of government themselves, but in the private sector, if you want to delegate that amount of power to the executive branch, you better be clear, you better be explicit, because this is a massive regulatory program that, in this case, vaccinations, we're talking about 80 million Americans were subject. So that, I think, was the distinction. Private sector, no mandates. Public sector, yes, you can mandate as long as the science backs up the fact that the vaccinations are safe and preferably effective.
But Bob, let me, if we bring it back to what I'll call the ethical right, I think the argument would be, and I'll turn it back to you in a second. The argument would be, well, if this is a vaccine that protects me, then and only me, and doesn't affect my ability to transmit the disease, then that would be a different moral issue than if this is a vaccine that is actually related to preventing transmission. And then you'd be dealing with the magnitude. So, for example, if the government were to say anyone who ever has a cold can't leave their home, and that would be, well, there's a matter of degree, because that would be certainly onerous. Certainly, you might speak to the moral side of this, Bob.
It's absolutely the case that when we're dealing with diseases that are not communicable, that is, where some people, by not being vaccinated, cannot impose risks on other people because the disease itself is not contagious, that's a whole different moral perspective than when we're dealing with diseases that are contagious. There is a little bit of a middle ground here, and that is sometimes when people get diseases and there's a pandemic, such as there was with COVID, even if there was no contagion involved, there's such a burden on our health facilities that people who have other non-related injuries find it difficult to obtain service. And so that's an indirect way that people with non-contagious diseases can nonetheless have an impact on innocent bystanders. But that's a rare situation. And in COVID, that was not the case. It was quite clearly a contagious, communicable disease. And so vaccinations in the public sector with proof of safety and efficacy were certainly justified as a moral matter, in my view. Not in the private sector.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to turn it over now to Jim. And maybe you could take us out of focus mode and we can entertain questions from the audience.
Okay, we are out of focus mode, and we got a couple of hands that are up, and we are ready to go. Jack, you're first, then Quinn, and we are open for more hands to use your Zoom hand down at the bottom and get in line. Jack.
Oh, I think I've got to let them.
Oh, I thought we unmuted.
Here we go. Okay, sorry, you can unmute
right, there you
yourself
go.
now.
Okay.
First, to Jay and Bob, I think the brochure is brilliant. I read it carefully about a month ago, and I just think it's very well done. So I commend you for that. I also think what you're doing is very important. I want to ask about the elephant in the room, and I'll phrase it in a simple terms, and then give three categories where this has occurred. And my question is, should we be talking about these things as well, so that we can identify the areas of possible disagreement? The elephant in the room, I think, is that we started out under the Declaration and even the Constitution with a vision of a sea of liberty with islands of government power. And what we have evolved to today is a sea of government power with islands of liberty. There's just no question about that. And there are at least three things that are the core drivers of that. One is philosophy, the philosophies of progressivism involving relativism and German historicism. The second is the structure of our government, meaning the idea of checks and balances and federalism, and very intentional philosophic decisions in the early 1900s to substitute politics, of separating politics and administration through administrative agencies. And then the third is the one that Bob said we'll talk about some other day, amendments to the Constitution that occurred in the late 1800s and then again during the New Deal to relegate the retained rights under the Ninth Amendment, which are referred to as privileges or immunities in the 14th Amendment, to relegate them to non-existence, to the point that Robert Bork referred to them as an ink blot. And then expanding congressional power under the Welfare Clause, Interstate Commerce Clause, and Necessary and Proper Clause. So this is not a forum to get into a big discussion about this, but it would require a college course. But there are clearly ideas about the ideas about rights and the source of rights and the nature of rights that are completely contrary to the ideas in the Declaration, to the point that in 1926, when Calvin Coolidge spoke on the 150th anniversary of the Declaration, he specifically addressed those ideas. So what do you guys think about interjecting discussions about those things into the conversation?
Bob, let me hit the moral side, first, and because I'll be brief on that. I think the idea here is that only if we first go upstream and talk about ethics and individuals and the moral rights common to individuals can we actually then engage the conversation that you're suggesting. So that's the idea, is get your mind around being robbed of my agency will create a kind of hopelessness in my life that will then cause me to not engage, to not think, if everything is political and everything is going to be, then that's just a race to, you put all the rights in the trough, don't expect anything but a food fight to get to the trough. And so this is a long game, and we believe it starts with that education about ethics and morals upstream. Now, Bob, the legal side, I think you can comment on.
So I think Jack is correct that the long-term trend of things has been an increase in government power. And by long-term, I mean from the time of the founding until today, an increase in government power and a diminution in some of the individual rights that originally were envisioned. And Jack, in your question, you identified several sources of that problem. One being the delegation of legislative power to unelected bureaucrats and administrative agencies. Another being the expansion of the general welfare clause. A third being the expansion of the ability of government to regulate interstate commerce. And the fourth being the interpretation of the necessary and proper clause. So I happen to share your views on all of those issues. And I think those issues are perfectly appropriate to engage in, to be discussed in this process of seeking cooperation and compromise. And the whole idea behind the Free Society Coalition is to bring people together who will pose these kinds of questions, express their views, maybe vigorously so, but be open-minded about it and listen to alternative views and alternative public policy, and occasionally maybe even move in a direction that encourages compromise. So while I think you've identified the problems, and I happen to share that view, I think the purpose of the Free Society Coalition is not to solve those problems, but rather to encourage the discussion about how to go about resolving them and how to reach some middle ground, which clearly we are not reaching today. And that's especially true when it comes to this separation of powers issue between executive power on the one hand and legislative and judicial power on the other.
So first we have to agree to talk with each other, and then we have to listen to each other, and then we have to come to resolutions.
Yes, I think that's right.
So that's sequentially big steps. Quinn, you're on, and then Harry.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for doing this. Bob said at one point, liberty is the highest value.
To me.
Yes. I think a lot of us, at least in terms of the civic realm, a lot of us would tend to agree. The problem I see is that young people today don't feel that, and if you talk to them about this, they give you a blank stare. It just doesn't register with them. A lot of what this pamphlet does, what this project does, I think makes the assumption that somewhere in there, in common experience, we will recognize that, oh, well, when we are presented with these wonderful ideas and values from the Declaration, that it will start to strike a chord. My question is, how do you transmit the idea that liberty is the highest value in the civic realm to young people if it does not strike a chord to start with?
Bob, I'll jump in and you can add.
Please.
Quinn, I think the you have to make this personal, and you have to bring it to a level of any of us with kids know that if you get on the wrong side of what a child or a young adult wants, you'll find that they have very strong views about who should make the important decisions in their lives, or the decision that's important to them at a given time. So the more you can personalize this with, who should be the person that makes these decisions, who should be responsible, the more then you build on a framework of, yes, I want to run my life. I do get that. And I think from a youngest age, human beings have a natural inclination to want to have agency. Any of us who used to, I guess the Velcro days have wiped out shoe tying, but I remember an experience I had with one of my kids where he just sticks his foot out and expects you to tie the shoe. And then at some point, just when you're in a hurry, after he starts to learn a little bit about how to do it, you try to tie the shoe because you're in a hurry, and he slaps your hand and says, "I do it," because he has a certain pride, a certain idea that I'm going to do this and I want to do it. And I think we rob people of that. And the communicating to people that's important to them, making it personal. I think that's the best answer, but I don't have a better one. So, Bob, you can add if you see something.
No, I think that's a good answer. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, Harry, you're up. You're muted. Harry, you're muted.
There we go. Yeah, I'm impressed by the assemblage of brain power here and clear thinking. And the problem I have, I think ethics is the key. The problem I have is how do you raise questions about the morality of altruistic self-sacrifice, which is incompatible with the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of wealth under capitalism? It seems like it's an unquestionable absolute. And I wonder if even any of you are prepared to question it or have questioned it. And if so, what happens?
Again, Bob, I'll start. I think the idea of framing what you're for, Harry, will get us a lot further. So frame, what I'll call a benevolent and ethical self-interest in some rational way. You see that in the positive psychology movement. You see it in the self-help movement. There's a health spa movement that's all about take care of yourself. There's all these positive things, and I think if you build on that, then you can recognize that by achieving, most of us want to make a difference in the world. We want to do something positive. We want to be proud of ourselves. Build on that and park the direct attack and figure out what we can agree on, because most people will agree on the positive and they have trouble with it.
Well, that's good. I like that. It's helpful. Thank you.
Great. I don't see any other hands that are raised.
Is Howard still on the call? Howard Simon?
I believe so. I did.
Howard, you had a question about equality. Do you want to ask that?
Can you just read it?
Yeah, I can if you want me to. So your question had to do with the emphasis on the values of the founders. It included liberty and justice. What of the value of equality? Jefferson included the value in the Declaration, but it took a second American Revolution to expand who was included and covered by that value. And I wondered if either of you could talk to the concept of equality back then and how we have had to fight for equality still fighting for it, I guess.
Well, equality back then, meaning the framing era, I think quite clearly meant equality of opportunity, equality before the law, treatment by the government of everyone on an equal footing. As I mentioned, that was the ideal, the goal. It wasn't achieved. It still hasn't been achieved, although we've made great strides. One problem has been that concept has been bastardized so that in many folks' minds, it no longer means equality of opportunity. It means equality of outcome. That is not what the framers intended. They didn't intend that we would make sure that nobody raises their hand above the crowd. They intended that the government would treat everybody equally and not extend opportunities and benefits to some people that it didn't extend to others. So while I think we are making strides toward equality of opportunity, and we have made great strides, I regret to say that much of the problems that have arisen with respect to equality have centered on a transformation of that value from equality of opportunity to equality of outcome.
I'd see it a little different. I would argue that the founders, and I think this is consistent with what you said, Bob, the founders would have an idea of equal political freedom would be the concept, and they did not properly apply it to the universe of people who it should apply to. and to the various issues. And that there, when you say equality of opportunity, to me, the challenge there is that there really isn't any such thing, because at the end of the day, the civil society, if you're a good parent, that's very different than the opportunity created for a child who is a crappy parent. And it never stops. So I do think keeping it framed in the political sphere is the better way to go. But I get I think we probably mean the same thing, just a different.
Yeah, I should qualify that when I say equality of opportunity. I'm not suggesting that each and every one of us, given that our natural attributes and traits are going to be have opportunities that are equal to what everybody else has. What I mean is that the government does not engage in extending preferential opportunities to some people as contrasted with others.
Except for special stuff for me, Bob. That's what I'm for.
Well,
And
I guess Santos is a good example. Anyway, that's just a sidebar. Quinn, you have your hand back up again. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, this is a very practical one. As Jay knows, I am very much in favor of what y'all are doing here. The question is, what, if any, sorts of interest has this gotten from national media, whether traditional media or social media, internet, viral, et cetera? Have you started to see anybody bite on this and start to chew on it?
Not as yet, but it's coming.
Okay. Do you have plans in place for it coming?
I'm not sure that we definitely aspire to get exposure everywhere we can, and the idea being that the more we build this, the more likely it is to create that. But we don't have a marketing budget or a plan or whatever to go proactively promote it that way. But
Okay. For last question, and for those of us who are not in the media, for those of y'all who are not in the media, I am, but so I've got maybe different things I can do to help. But what can non-media people do, non-traditional media people do to help you with that cause?
I would say and push it in their organizations, and push it to get exposure for their organizations, to promote the interest of those organizations leveraging this content. And I think you got the 250th, and people need a good material for the 250th. Much of the stuff that's being promoted is abstract and hard, or history, and abstract and mushy, or it's history. And both of those are a little harder push than what we have. I think this is an easy push, but anyway.
I would add that when Jay says, no, we don't have a big marketing budget and we're not prepared to go out and mount a huge media campaign, that while that's true, our pursuit of this objective is going to be through different channels. Everybody currently on the Free Society Coalition board has extensive contacts with other groups, both on the left and on the right. And it's through those other groups that we hope to make some progress in this area. So the idea is to use the materials that we produce, maybe even the speakers that we would provide, to spread the message. And that doesn't require that we get great press coverage and have media broadcasting our mission. What it does require is that we encourage enough organizations who are in the process, beginning in January, of celebrating this 250th anniversary, get these organizations on board and have them use the resources of the Free Society Coalition to spread the message. And I think we have a pretty good game plan in place to do that.
Not trying guarantees you have no chance. So thank you for doing this. Harry, you get the last question, and then we have some summary comments for those of us who are still on the call.
I think we ought to share on a voluntary basis email or contact information. Is that possible? The chat seems to be disabled, so I can't put mine in.
I don't know why it would be disabled.
It says chat disabled.
Chat has been disabled since about 5 minutes into this.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Anyway, it shouldn't be disabled now. Just send to info@floridiansfordemocracy.org. info@floridiansfordemocracy.org. That's the,
And-
Floridians for Democracy?
yes, one word, info@floridiansfordemocracy, one word.org. And we can share and connect you with anybody you'd like to be connected with.
And the same with the Free Society Coalition .org. They can connect as well.
Great. Okay. So I want to thank everybody, Jay, Bob, Bill, wonderful evening, great questions and great interaction. And once again, the challenge is on each of us as individuals to figure out who we are, what we want to be, and how actually, for many of us, how to protect the viability and the freedom for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and future generations. We do want to share that within the next 24 to 48 hours maximum, you will get what we call the action agenda, which we've been producing the last few months, which takes communications from tonight's program, puts them into recommendations of what we as individuals can do or collectively can do. You will receive that along with the YouTube link for this program. We also produce what we call Hear Our Voices, which are action opportunities for people to do from their own homes. They don't even have to go to an organization or do anything. And we're always open to adding more ideas and recommendations to that. The next program that we're participating in is coming up in November, on November the 11th. Fred Stewart, who is the author of Money, Lies, and God, will be in person at the UU congregation in Naples, but we will also be live streaming that on that evening from 7 to 9. The registration information has been in our newsletters. And again, if you don't get the newsletter and you'd like to, you can send that note to info@floridiansfordemocracy.org and we'll make sure that happens for you. What a wonderful evening. And Bill, do you have any closing remarks? You did a great job. Jay?
Well, thank you. I want to thank Jay and Bob. It was really enlightening to hear your viewpoints on some of these very hard issues. And it's clear that the initiative that you've set forward is going to be a meaningful way for us to engage our fellow Americans for the 250th.
Great.
So thanks for being here.
Thank
you
you.
so much. As we've done the last number of months, we'll stay on the call for a few people. If there's anything you'd like to do, we'll release our panelists. They're welcome to stay. But we just have an open mic and it's not a Q&A process. So just speak up if you want to do anything, and we don't need to stay up all night either. So we'll shut off and shut up. But again, thanks, Bob and Jay, for a creative opportunity to try to find a way to get all of us, as many as possible, to learn from the founding fathers and to share and compromise and grow and make a difference in the lives of future people. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're gonna sign off and say goodnight, and we'll save the chat and save the program. That's our story. Good night, Bob.
Good night.
Thanks, Bob.